Thomas Cookson's review for Revelation of the Daleks, published on the 27th of the 4th, 08. The mid-80s era of the show, when the Doctor was played by Colin Baker, was a short and very poor era of the show, exhibiting some of the worst episodes of the series, side by side with episodes that seemed to be running on autopilot without any sense of engagement. Admittedly, there were some very entertaining moments in the story stacked with the Cybermen and the two Doctors, but little that made the episode solid. However, Colin Baker did fortunately have one very good and strong story, and this was the one, Revelation of the Daleks. The funerary pyre of tranquil repose is a concept done very well, as the story discusses whether the idea of cryogenic preservation would work pragmatically in a society that struggles through overpopulation and diminishing food supplies to support the people alive as it is, and bases itself on capitalist competition that cannot afford to have sleeping moguls. Furthermore, the story is aided by the kind of visuals that convey its atmosphere of chilly catacombs with its snow-covered exterior landscapes and very icy ultraviolet lighting within. A lot of the Colin Baker stories featured an obligatory abundance of fluorescent colours and lighting, simply for the sake of superficial eye candy, but this is one of the few such stories where the lighting effects really do give strong atmosphere that cuts deep, that grips you by the shoulders and commands your attention. The thing I lap up about this episode is that it really does say a lot about the era it was written in. Doctor Who has often walked the line between sheer escapism and a show with relevant social commentary. This episode covers a lot of contemporary ground, it must be said. It refers to a galactic famine that can only be an allegory to what was going on in Ethiopia and other third world countries at the time. We see an allegory of the rampant police brutality of the time, which is heavily alleged during the miners' strike, in one of the show's most graphic interrogation scenes. It refers to the growth of big businesses with a tendency to exploit its menial workers. It uses the landscape of the future as its palette to explore this mixture of hope and cynicism about where we're all headed. The future is portrayed as an Art Deco paradise with plenty of wonderful anachronisms such as brass, marble pillars, statues and oil paintings in this futuristic world of higher technology. However, as technology has advanced, humanity is plagued by the same kind of problems it has always struggled with, such as poverty, tyranny, corruption and violence, as well as war and disease. Indeed, under suggestion, I have come to wonder if there is more than a little nod to the AIDS scare in the focus on incurable diseases. The episode takes place in a superficially mannered and sophisticated society, and through the eyes of two of its renegades, Natasha and Grigori, the two body snatchers who are debased characters in the eyes of everyone in this polite society. They break us into the funerary place, take us into the bowels of the complex, and reveal the true horrors buried within the catacombs, before we are eventually confronted with the pus-stained head of Stengos. The moment is superb, juxtaposing the ethereal atmosphere which conveys the hope of everlasting life, with the very tortured performance of Alec Lindstedt as Stengos. What he does is to juxtapose the human element of his psyche with the conditioning for the Dalek mentality, his love for his daughter and his sense of human despair being bulldozed through by the manic rantings of the Dalek propaganda of conquest and extermination, racial purity, and the New Order. It is a superb sequence that portrays hope of immortality and the undying love and memories of the father, only to snatch it all away remorselessly in uncontrollable, spurting rage and pleas for death as a mercy. It really puts a human face to the Daleks' unseen emotions of hatred, rage, and almost evangelical passion. This scene is wonderfully married to an earlier enigmatic moment where the Doctor and Perry come to blows with a savage mutant who does not respond at all to the Doctor's attempts to pacify him with hypnosis using a swinging medallion. The two scenes together, one making suggestion and the other unravelling the same mystery, both fulfill the puzzle piece of this paradoxical blend of juxtaposed humane and savage virtues. In a way, the episode gains a lot of its power from this compulsive borrowing of the hidden, true ugliness beneath the superficial. I find this refreshing for a mid-80s era of Doctor Who and TV and cinema in general, when negativity was often portrayed as a very naked and surface element of people. The fact that the episode plays largely as a comedy of manners before descending into bloodshed then is sandwiched by the reactions of the well-mannered and desensitized, who remark on the shattering moments with some of the most callous and darkest humour. This makes its violence, death and grotesques all the more striking. Major characters like Littleton Takis, who had the work at Tranquil Repose, start out as a cheerful double act. In fact, they share a similar physique to old Laurel and Hardy, but when the story gives them an opportunity to interrogate captured fugitives behind closed doors, it really channels the most brutal and sadistic characteristics, puts them into shocking relief, violently shattering our safe conceptions of the Jolly Two. Similarly, the character of the woman Tassenbecker, who is hopelessly in love with Jobel, her uptight and blindly self-centered boss at Tranquil Repose, begins as a rather pathetic and modest character who is much belittled, but when Davros takes something of a romantic interest in her and begins to manipulate her, she channels her sensitive passions and turns into a very vicious and murderous woman. I love Davros' little romanticised moment where he tells Tassenbecker how he has observed her humiliating moments at the mercy of Jobel's bullying and suggests, if someone had treated me the way he has treated you, I think I would have killed them. Whilst Jenny Thomason's performance as Assassin Becker was rather ill-judged and melodramatic, there is something about the music of that scene that really carries the pathos of her character as she surrenders to an undignified eruption of her violent passions. There is something about this mask of niceties that makes the horrors underneath so monumental. This is rather fitting in this story where the Daleks are painted a cream white with gold trimmings to give them a false air of purity and prestige too. In one chilling example, there is a moment where Davros realizes that assassins have come to Tranquil Repose to kill him. Davros deduces that his greedy socialite of a business partner, Kara, has employed those assassins, since she would have the most to gain from his death. But when Davros contacts Kara by videophone, he keeps his poker face and pretends not to suspect her, and feigns concern that assassins might be after her head as well, politely insists on sending 2 Daleks to her as her bodyguards, on the pretext that, unlike her own security officers, Daleks are incapable of being bribed of, and it's just so perfectly sinister and noose-tightening to see the hidden malice beneath the insisted generosity. Whilst this ordinary workplace may seem a strange environment for a story upon which the whole fate of the galaxy hangs in the balance, it works nonetheless. The desperation and passion of a scene where Stengos is being mentally tortured as he is transformed into a Dalek is a moment that stands alone, but somehow is so out of place, sandwiched between 2 contrasting scenes of humour and etiquette, that it lasts as an omen of the horrific fate that awaits all humans if Davros succeeds. Some fans have bemoaned the tendency to fall for the Dalek voices, voices in the story to be on the squeaky side, but personally I find it a most effective touch of giving the Daleks a distinctly panicky and emotional quality that rather tragically reminds me of the benign human beings that these poor creatures once were before Davros transformed them. Furthermore, there is something about seeing the Daleks as being servile and under Davros' thumb once more that is so unnerving. The only times that they exterminate anybody is when they are ordered to do so by Davros. The Daleks may look like stoic automatons, but within them is a savage and psychotically homicidal mutant creature. The Daleks have always been a very evil, belligerent, and savage force, of a tendency to boast of their supremacy, when instead they are being silent and obedient, in a word domesticated. It just feels unnatural and suspicious. They somehow seem more volatile in this state because they're just sensing something scheming and evil within them, waiting for them to break out of this rut of servitude and start killing everyone in sight. For me, what the Daleks always represent is a sense of disgust of all that is vile and horrific about humanity, all the chaos and violence and sadism. To me, the Daleks can either represent that evil of humanity, or they can represent this sense of disillusionment that simply desires the most ruthless eliminating solutions to the problems of the world. They are the soldiers of a war to end all wars. It is fitting, then, that this corrupt environment should be the playing field. As mentioned above, the rich and powerful have come to Tranquil Repose to be preserved, but really they would be discarded as dead weight once they are frozen, because there would be too much of a burden on the struggling economy otherwise. And so when the Doctor and Davros finally meet and have their obligatory little conversation of their mutually opposed ethics, Davros justifies himself well when he argues that he has helped the many people that the government has abandoned. Not only is he playing a part in alleviating the galactic famine, but he has resurrected many of the sleeping upper classes just as they were promised, albeit by turning them into Daleks, which Davros describes as a fitting destiny for people of status and ambition. But so convinced is Davros that his goals are truly noble that we can momentarily forget that he has committed some very evil deeds during the course of this episode that are horrific even by his standards. This debate between Davros and the Doctor is really one of the few moments of the story that the Doctor is actually a part of. Throughout most of the episode, the Doctor is still on the journey towards Tranquil Repose and is in fact completely oblivious to the presence of Davros or the Daleks. The fact that the Doctor is oblivious to being observed by Big Brother, to the amusement of a gloating Davros, is one of the major comedy highlights of this episode. The large absence of the Doctor's involvement in the plot is partly what makes this a unique and atypical Doctor Who story, for its plethora of characters with their own important part to play. Natasha and Grigori take over the Doctor's usual role as investigators breaking into secret locations and discovering the plot to conquer the galaxy, and the skilled assassins Orsini and Bostock take over the Doctor's role as the heroic crusaders fighting against evil. It seems here actually that the peace-loving Doctor is made superfluous by a bunch of vigilantes. Orsini and Bostock are not merely mercenaries, where the script never lets us forget that they are killers, but they are noblemen from a long-gone chivalrous age who consider it noble honour to kill Davros and end his evil reign. In that, they can do the things the Doctor isn't capable of doing, because, as we all know, the Doctor could never morally go through with pulling the trigger. Witness the last time he tried to kill Davros. In that way, Orsini and Bostock, as vigilantes, represent the counterbalance for how, as mentioned above, the savagery of the universe can only be settled by the most ruthless of solutions. Orsini, by the way, is an excellent character. Very well spoken, with piercing eyes and a chivalrous manner. His leather fashion fits him well as a Crusader character and a tough nut, and in a way predates the fashion of the Ninth Doctor, and the story and direction gives him plenty of opportunities to display his martial arts, his strategist skills, and his larger-than-life presence. The brilliance of this is that it builds up The hope that this man can kill Davros easily, only to deliver a sumptuous small-scale battle. For its small budget, the BBC explosives are quite impressive, between the assassins and the Daleks. This concludes when Davros brilliantly overpowers both Orsini and Bostock in a short space of time in a way that momentarily makes us believe that Davros really is as invincible as a god and an everlasting evil, and that literally no mortal man can ever destroy him. But I'll stop there before I give away too much spoiler. This is certainly an episode, much like others of its era, that really aims to please. It features a star-studded lineup of actors from the likes of Clive Swift, William Gaunt, Eleanor Bron, and even Alexei Sayle. It is one of the most visually sumptuous episodes of Doctor Who, and it boasts one of the most rich and highly literate scripts since the Tom Baker era. It is tuned to be entertaining and keep the audience on its toes in every scene, in a manner similar to the show Network 7 and early episodes of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, but also maintains a strict maturity and knows which scenes to allow to take centre stage and to form into the peak of the hills, so that the abundance doesn't dwarf the main thrust, which I think was neglected elsewhere in the era to the detriment of the stories. There's not much else I can really say, to be honest. It is probably Eric Saward's finest script, as well as another top-notch on the belt of Caves of Androzani director Graeme Harper, who is now on board as a regular director for the new series, starting in its second season. On the subject of the new series, here's a little trivial point. When Perry meets the local DJ of Tranquil Repose, played by Alexei Sayle, of his usual excitability and talent for relating anecdotes about his upbringing, there is a Glenn Miller song playing in the background. The same song is played in the new episode The Empty Child and Captain Jack is Romancing Rose. The story has now been released on DVD and has been even more improved for it. There are several moments of poor sound quality in the original version, but have been nicely tuned up here for far better viewing, with only one little niggle left for the subtitles function can amend nicely. There's also the option to watch an amended version of the story with improved visual effects to replace the rather dated and misfired little laser displays of the original. I enjoyed that option actually. There is some unedited footage of the filming, of the explosive battle scenes that are very informative as to how these scenes got made. There is a retrospective documentary of interviews, interspersed with clips that give high praise to this as a timeless story, as well as mentioning its origins being inspired by the Evelyn Waugh novel The Loved One. The AD saw some renewed interest in Evelyn Waugh after the 1981 superb televisation of Brideshead Revisited, which presented the book's feel-good and life-affirming quality of the BBC's penchant for lavish production and acting. Whilst patient viewing was demanded for the series, it proved to be a major ratings hit. There was also a commentary, and finally, there are 3 short deleted scenes, including one moment where Lilt and Takis lament the death of some of Davros' security guards who have been exterminated by Daleks on the rampage. This scene was presumably cut out because it interrupted the momentum of a big action build-up, but I wish it had been left in, as it elevates Davros' guards above being simply disposable cannon fodder for the body snatchers and assassins to casually gun down now and again, in a rather cold-blooded manner. It also could have provided a necessary bridge between the brutality of Takis and Lilt in their interrogation scene, and their turning into good guys towards the end, which, as it was, seemed a bit too paradoxical, but in any case, this is a superb addition to any self-respecting Doctor Who fan's collection, and may even turn a few heads.